secure.
Hi, I'm Bob Jameson with CSM International with Episode 4 of the Data Sovereignty series. I'd like you to picture this. You spend years building a proprietary process, customer data, operational patterns, pricing logic, competitive intelligence, all of it living on a platform you pay a vendor to run for you. And somewhere in the terms of service you click through, you gave that vendor the right to use everything I just described to train their AI, and it can be accessible to your competitors through that AI platform. This is not hypothetical. This is happening right now, and most organizations have no idea that it applies to them. Over the last 3 episodes, we've built a framework for thinking about data sovereignty, where your data physically lives, what your contracts actually say about who controls it, and which data needs the highest level of protection and which can comfortably live in a standard cloud environment. This episode closes that round with a question that didn't fully exist 5 years ago, and that is now one of the most consequential data decisions any organization can make. When you feed your data into a vendor's platform, are you also feeding it into their AI? The answer, increasingly, is yes. And the mechanism isn't a breach. It isn't a hack. It is a terms service clause, sometimes buried into an update, sometimes sitting in plain sight on page 40 of an agreement that nobody read, granting the vendor broad rights to use your data, the data that you generate on their platform, for the purpose of improving their products and services. Improving their products and services is a phrase that does the work. In 2024 and 2025, that phrase, in context with AI development, means training data. So let's be precise about what this actually means, because the details matter and the framing can get loose. When an AI model is trained, it learns patterns from examples, enormous volumes of them. These examples shape what the model knows, how it responds, and what it's good at, and where its blind spots are. The organization that controls the training data has significant influence on what the resulting model can do. If your proprietary data, your customer interaction patterns, your internal documents, your pricing decisions, your operational workflows, is that training data set, then the patterns and the insights embedded in your data are now embedded into a model that the vendor sells to your competitors. Not your raw data in any recoverable form, but the learned value extracted from it. That distinction matters legally. Vendors will correctly point out that they aren't handing your spreadsheets to a competitor, but the competitive intelligence encoded in the model trained on your data is still derived from your data. The value has been extracted and generalized, and is now baked into a product that anybody can buy. Several major platforms introduced AI training rights as an opt-out versus opt-in, meaning that unless you actively found the setting and disabled it, you were consenting by default. The notifications, when they exist, often arrived as part of general terms update email that looked identical to dozens of others. That is not by accident or poor communications. Opt-out defaults dramatically increase participation rates. For a company building a training data set, the difference between opt-in and opt-out consent is potentially the difference between having a marginal or a comprehensive data set. The design choice is financially motivated. The problem is compounded by how deeply embedded SaaS platforms are now in the core business operations. CRM systems, HR platforms, ERP tools, customer support software, internal collaboration tools. These don't hold peripheral data. They hold the operational record of how your business actually runs. If those platforms have broad AI training rights over the data that you generate on them, the scope of what's potentially in scope is not marginal. It's central to your operations. So there's 3 implications on this. The first one is for governments. Governments and regulated industries face an especially acute version of this problem. Data that is subject to handling requirements, classified information, personally identifiable information under privacy statutes, controlled unclassified information in the defense context, does not lose those handling requirements because it passes through a commercial SaaS platform. If that platform's AI training rights are broad enough to reach regulated data, the organization using that platform may have already created a compliance violation without any malicious action on anybody's part. This is an emerging area of regulatory attention, and it is not fully resolved in most of those jurisdictions. The organizations that have documented their data flows and reviewed their vendor agreements are the ones who will know whether they have an exposure. The ones who haven't are operating on assumptions. Implication for companies. For businesses, the practical question is straightforward, even if the answer is uncomfortable. Do you know which of your vendors currently have AI training rights over your data, the data you generate, on their platforms? Not which ones you think do, or which ones you would expect to, but which ones actually do, per the current version of their terms of agreement. That question, taken seriously, requires the same contract review discipline we talked about in Episode 2, applied specifically to the AI rights language. It also connects directly to the data tiering framework from Episode 3. Your Tier 1 data should never be on a platform with broad AI training rights in the first place. Your Tier 2 data needs contractual carve-outs or documented opt-outs. Your Tier 3 data, low sensitivity operational content, is the only category where the risk is genuinely low. The business risk is not abstract. If the vendor trains a model on your customer interaction data, then license that model to a competitor, the competitive intelligence advantage you built through years of customer relationships has been partially transferred through a contract you signed without a breach and without malicious action. You funded the training of a capability that now works against you. Implications for the future. This dynamic is going to accelerate, not slow down. The demand for high-quality, domain-specific training data is enormous and growing. General Internet text produces general models. Proprietary operational data from real businesses produces specialized models that are dramatically more useful for specific applications. The vendors who have the most valuable training data pipelines will build the best domain-specific AI products. The incentive to quietly expand the scope of training data rights through terms updates and to make opt-out as frictionless as possible for them and as invisible as possible for you is going to remain intensive. What's likely coming is a wave of litigation and regulatory action that begins to draw clearer lines around what improving products and services can legitimately include. But that's a 2 to 5 year horizon at minimum. In the meanwhile, the organizations protecting themselves are the ones reading the contracts right now. Here's the idea I want to leave with you, and it connects everything we've covered in this round. Data sovereignty has always been about a single question: who actually benefits from the value of your data? In Episode 1, we talked about physical and operational control, because if someone else controls the infrastructure your data lives on, they have leverage over the value it contains. In Episode 2, we looked at contractual layer, because your data is a defined term, and that definition is often narrower than you assumed. In Episode 3, we built a tiered framework because the answer to how much control you need is different for different data, and trying to answer it uniformly leads to either overspending or underprotecting. This episode closes the round with the sharpest version of the same question. If your data is being used to train an AI that your vendor sells commercially, then the value of your data is flowing to somebody else's product line. You paid to generate it, you didn't consent to monetize it, but you may have agreed to anyway in a language written by people who understood exactly what they were drafting. Data sovereignty, at its core, is not a technical challenge. It is an ownership challenge. And ownership, in the modern technology economy, is defined by contracts and architecture, not by the word yours in a marketing brochure. If you follow this entire round, you now have a framework to ask better questions about where your data lives, what you actually agreed to, which data needs the hardest controls, and which of your vendors are quietly extracting value from what you generate for them. Those two questions don't require a new tool. They require leadership paying attention. Well, that wraps up the data sovereignty round. 4 episodes, 1 core idea. In the modern technology economy, sovereignty means knowing, not assuming, who controls the value of your data. If you watched all 4, you've got a framework that most organizations at the executive level have never formally worked through. And that's worth something. Next round, we're turning that same scrutiny on a claim that you've heard all too many times, and it probably feels like a settled fact, that the cloud is cheaper. We're going to look at the actual numbers, the full cost picture that the vendor pitch decks leave out, and let you decide whether the math holds up. Until then, if you want more of this type of analysis without a sales pitch, please subscribe. I'll see you in the next round.
System breach detected. Initializing defense protocols. Secure.